Hello, this is Annette with Project Refine Life. Welcome to my channel. Today I am here to talk about the Ritual Tarot by Tiara May. I first saw this deck on Micah's channel and I will put a link to her video below. It immediately caught my attention. This deck is inspired by the RWS and the Thoth Tarot and was created in a true collage style, like the collage style from the 70s. The only thing in my collection that comes close to this style is the Lioness Oracle Tarot, which I deeply love. But the images here are extremely different. The energy is extremely different from that deck. This has a very visceral feel to it. Just what I'm getting from it is very, very different from that deck. So what makes this deck somewhat unique to me is that it does not contain any numbers or titles within the deck. I've never had a deck without the titles or the numbers, so this is different, with the exception of oracle cards, but not a tarot deck. The creator created these cards one piece at a time. She cut out these images and glued them down. The only things that she didn't glue down were the swords, the wands, the pentacles, and the cups, because what she did is she used the same images for those items over and over again throughout the deck. So that way you could quickly identify what suit you're in, which I thought, oh my gosh, that was so smart, and thank you so much, because it did help me out a lot. There is a video from the creator where she is creating several of these cards, and I will include it below. Now, as I just stated, although I fell in love with these images immediately upon watching Micah's channel, like seriously, I was in it from that first video. I did wait. It is a pricey deck, and I do not have a problem with buying a deck that costs a little bit more, because at this point, I'm really only buying decks that really call to me, that really have a reason to be within the library of decks that I have. It did take me just a little bit to order the deck, but obviously it's here now, and I've had it for about 3 weeks. Since the deck did not come with any titles or numbers, I spent the first week just reviewing the deck in order, one by one. I didn't even open the guidebook. I didn't even look at the guidebook. I just took the cards one by one, just like this, looking at each card, looking at everything that I could look at to identify what card it was. I took out my one and only true Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and I kind of went card by card with each one, just looking at the images. Then I put away the RWS, and I just kept this deck nearby. It never left my side. Seriously, the only time that it wasn't near me is if I was cooking, taking a shower, or teaching a class. While I was here, it was always by my side. So that was week 1. This deck, let me explain a little bit about the deck itself. It does come with this fully illustrated guidebook, or booklet, I should say, and each of the majors has a full image of the card and a full description of the card. For the minors, there are smaller cards, with the court cards being a little bit larger, and a quick description of the cards. And we will get into my thoughts about the guidebook in just a few minutes. The deck itself, the cards are printed on 350 GSM with a white core cardstock with a 100% ecologic smooth varnish on both sides for a smooth shuffle. The cards measure 3.5 by 5, and they simply came packaged in this velvet bag. That's it. The guidebook was in a nice little wrapping, beautiful wrapping, with a little letter from her that was very nice, very simple, and I really appreciated the way that she packaged it. I have since ordered a nice Peggy bag to properly store this treasure. Because I was intimidated by this deck, I recorded a flip through of the deck while it was still in order about a week ago because I didn't want to worry about putting this deck back in order because I thought, oh my gosh, will I ever be able to put it back in order without, looking at the guidebook? I'm here to tell you that yes, I can. I can put this deck back in order. Do I choose to put it back in order? No. Because of the work that I've been doing with this deck, I feel like it has a certain energy and I don't want to mess with it because it feels really good at this point. So I'm going to leave it alone. So for the flip through, you're going to see that my setup looks a little bit differently. It is the deck in order, so that way you can see them one card at a time from the beginning to the end. So here we go with the flip through. Working with this deck has put me through a range of emotions, from being completely unsure about working with it to feeling confident. The creator's intention was for the reader to develop an intuitive and intimate relationship with the deck. And once you start working with the deck, you can clearly see how brilliantly she used these images. You know, I've seen Dawn Michelle take her tarot decks and say, these aren't working for me. I'm going to change this. I'm going to take off the borders. I'm going to chop this off. I'm going to take off the numbers. And I always thought, oh my gosh, she is just amazing. I don't know that I would be able to read a deck without the titles or the numbers. But working with this deck, I realize that without the titles and the numbers, as long as there's something that shows me within the deck that it correlates to the RWS, because that's what I'm familiar with, the RWS. The Thoth I'm working with, but that is coming very slowly for me. But as long as there's imagery that connects the two, I can read the deck. According to this one, maybe it's just this one. I'm not quite sure, but I'm building a really deep relationship with this deck because of it. It has become a time for me to just focus and really stay concentrated at the time that I'm working with the deck and spending that quality moment with it. It feels sacred, honestly, when I'm working with this deck. It feels extremely special. Although I have more than a few favorites in my library of tarot and oracle decks, there are only a few that bring me the feeling that I get when I'm working with this deck. And that says a lot. The creator of this deck was very intentional while creating this deck. She hand chose these images one by one. She laid them all out. And even in choosing a company to print the deck, she chose a company that was eco-friendly, whose facilities were entirely run by solar power, using only premium quality CE certified papers and food grade inks. And all of this pours into this deck. All of this, you can feel it all when working with this deck. So being that the cards were printed with the environment in mind, the creator does include a shuffling disclosure, stating that the cards are larger than your average standard tarot decks and are not easily bendable. So if you choose to riffle shuffle, your deck may see slight wear and tear to the card edges. So if you riffle shuffle, I don't riffle shuffle, and it's just simply because I'm really bad at it. I really suck at riffle shuffling because I never played cards as I was a kid. Most of the time I would just do like the concentration game where you would play them all, put them all down and try to work with your intuition. That's what my idea was of working with decks. So I never learned to shuffle. So for me, it's not a big deal to riffle shuffle, but if you do decide to purchase this deck and you do riffle shuffle, you will have a card to add to the hashtag my disshuffle decks. So that is the only thing about the card stock. So now in working with this deck, I just want to say that if you have ever felt in the past that by either chopping off the titles of your deck or working with a deck that has no keywords or labels, all I can say is that working with something like this deck and working with something like the soul cards, you find your meaning. In looking at these cards, you let your intuition go to work, you allow yourself to connect to source, and you can find your meanings while working with these cards. So whether you choose to go by the guidebook and use the meanings assigned to the cards by the creator, or you create your own, that's entirely up to you. Another thing that is, if you work with the Thoth system and you switch your strength card, then you can do that with this deck. You can easily just move those around because there's nothing on here that says that it's number 8. So that is another good thing about this deck, is that it can move into either system. So now just quickly looking at some of these cards, because I've been shuffling them, I just want to point out a few things. Her use of these eyeballs within the deck has been extraordinary to me, because she will either like take out an eyeball if for some reason that card kind of depicts you not seeing something, or she will add more eyeballs, or put an eyeball on the third eye, or cover your eyes with one eyeball. It really is such a clever deck. I love the way that she did this. Now, this was one of the cards that kind of had me stuck a little bit, and this is the Star card. But as you can see, she's lying here in this fetal type position, and over here you have the Tower, over here you have the Moon, and those are the decks or the cards before and after the Star card. So that was my first cue. Oh, it's the Star card, because here's the Tower, here's the Moon, so the one in between is the Star card. And if you use the cards before and after into your reading, that kind of helps out a little bit as well. So some of them are pretty cut and dry, and some of them are just so filled with, like this one right here. This is the Page of Wands, and just look at him. Just amazing. I really do love this deck, and there is so much in here. There's so many little nuggets. Now there's a few cards, like this one right here, that I wish would have had some more collage work in here. And you know what? I think that's strictly just from my point of view, because I am so stuck on, I guess I got really spoiled very quickly by all of the imagery within this deck, that I wanted some more within the other cards that felt a little pippish to me. Even this is not pippish, because if you look here, you do have the work that you've put into it. You can see what you've worked for and what you've accomplished with it. Now I kept this one to the side, because all of the aces are just kind of like this. They're all just very plain with the one solid image in it. But if you start looking through these cards, you can see the imagery and where it fits in. So like here, this is one of those cards where you see all those little eyeballs within her face. So that is the Sun. That's a Sun card. And it's easy to see. But another thing that I like about this deck is that there are all these little nuggets. You really have to search in this deck sometimes to make sure that all the, like here, all the swords are here. So this is the 4 of Swords. And I was like, I only see 3. I only see 3. That was the first night that I got it. I only see 3. Then the next morning, there it was. There's the 4th knife right there, or sword, right below her. So it is almost like a little bit of a scavenger hunt, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like, it's there, and it's very obvious to you. This is the World card. And I love also her use of, let me see if I can find it, of almost, you can see the ages within the court system. You can see the youth, and you can see the wisdom within the figures or the sculptures that she used for the art. I think it's really just brilliant. This is the Temperance card. And see, like right here, look at, he has an eye on his hand. So let's get into the guidebook. As far as the guidebook, I really loved the details within the majors. It is just beautiful. Some of them have quotes, some of them have poems. She has the opposing cards, the reinforcing cards, and I just think that it's really, really well done. Up at the top, she does provide just like some key words, and then she gets into the meaning. And like I said, here we go. Here's a quote from Carl Jung. And she has the reverse, the opposing, and the reinforcing, like I stated earlier. Now, with the minors, I do love that she includes the elemental energy of the suit, which I think is great. Now, the description of the minors itself is a little short. It's effective, it's good, but it's a little short. Sometimes it's just keywords, and sometimes it is, you know, a description that she came up with for the card. But I think that because some of these cards are just so elaborate and there's so much depth within the card, I am at a point that even though I'm reading these intuitively for the most part, I want to know about the art. I want to know about the statue. I want to know what her feeling is on these cards. So, and I don't think that it's actually necessary, but that's just me. That's what I want within the guidebook for this deck, just because. Not because I need it, I just want it. So I'm just left with that desire to be cued into her use of the images and the cards and more information. And but nonetheless, I love this deck. And in this short time that I've had this deck, it is among my top favorite decks. Now, if getting a deck without titles or numbers just doesn't feel right to you, I totally get that. And you're attracted to the art. I just want to let you know that the creator is in the process of creating a second edition. So I looked up this deck in Instagram, and I found a review by Indie Deck Reviews. If you're not familiar with them, they are a great source on Instagram. They review indie decks. And the creator wrote that in a response to their review, she wrote to them that she is currently working on expanding the guidebook to include detailed descriptions for the minor arcana. She states, I hope to have this expanded version available for the second edition printing. I understand that a deck sans titles can be intimidating and overwhelming. So I'm in the process of designing a version of the deck that features titles and numbers on each card. I hope to offer a titled version of the deck by the time I print the next run. So now currently this deck only ships within the continental US. So sorry about that. But I'm going to give you just a few deck pairings, just really quick, because I do like to pair my decks. So here we have the Threads of Fate Rose Edition. And the reason that I like these two together is not so much because I feel like aesthetically they work. It's because this, to me, this Oracle deck is a very shamanic and very deeply rooted deck. It contains a variety of elements mentioned in the guidebook for each card. So with the two of them, it's just really a deep reading. So I do like the Threads of Fate. Now, another deck that I feel would work with this deck, but I haven't worked with it yet together, is the Shaman's Oracle. And I just feel like because of the nature of the cards that they would work together pretty well. This again is very deep, it's very ancestral, it's very ritualistic type. So I think that these will work together. I haven't done it yet, but I think that they will. Now another one that I think will work together well with are the soul cards. Because again, two intuitive decks, no titles, no interruptions, just the deck and your gut feelings. I think that these two are going to work perfectly. I've yet to do it, but I think that these two are going to work really well together. Okay, so now the deck that I have been focusing on working with, the Ritual Tarot, is a deck that I saw on Meg's channel over at Rose Honey Ritual, which is the Ancient Ritual Postures. And I am, this is another deck that really has not left my sight since it came in. This is full of ancient ritual postures. And it is an oracle deck, but also meant for you to work with in a completely different method, which I will get into later. But another review, not this one, but these work together very, very well. You do have these statues that kind of like blend together the images of both decks. And just the way that they speak to one another, if you're looking at them, and you can even just kind of go into it intuitively. If you look at her sleeping and then looking at these, this card right here, you can form your meaning. Now, since this card is out here, I want to share with you. This is the Seven of Cups, and this, I'm gonna spoil it a little bit. This card on the manual, or the guidebook rather. See, this is where I say it's descriptive, but I want more. But this one is compared to the seven deadly sins, which I thought was brilliant because I had never put those two together for the Seven of Cups and the seven deadly sins. But yeah, that totally works. So those are my deck pairings for this deck so far. I don't know if I'm going to find more within my collection that I feel really mesh well together, but that's what I have been using so far. In conclusion, when it comes to reading tarot, this deck has really brought me some additional confidence within my reading ability, and just it's pushing me to work intuitively with me. It reminds me to be compassionate for myself when it comes to reading the tarot, and it allows me to recognize that I am creative, because sometimes I doubt myself when it comes to that I am creative and that I can pick out the creative spots within this deck and some of the little nuggets that she included. And I hope to find one in here. I don't want to ruin it for you if you get this deck. But like this one right here, this is the Judgment card. And at first I just did not get it. I'm like, this is one of those cards. I'm like, I don't get it. How is this the Judgment card? But if you look here, you see all the people underneath. Like sometimes you have to get up really close and personal with this deck. And this all-seeing eye right here, that replaces the angel. Because isn't that what she's doing within the Judgment card? And this is the Strength card, showing this beautiful compassion, strength coming from compassion. This is the Empress. It's just a beautiful, beautiful deck. This is the Ten of Cups. And the Ten of Cups, it just brought to mind me and my sister, because like I could see me and my sister just, you know, and we have before been in the middle of nowhere, just having a blast, and joking and laughing and having a good time regardless of where we're at. So this Ten of Cups was just gorgeous to me. That's the Emperor. I mean, and some of these, like you can clearly see what they are. Some of them you do have to dig in a little bit deeper. And here within the Eight of Cups, you can see her kind of like pushing on the brakes a little bit, like just let's slow this down a little bit. This isn't working. The wheel is just amazing to me. Now, when I lost my son, one of the things that stood out to me was that the world just kept going. I was in slow motion, like this black and white image in the background here. I was in slow motion. Every minute was like an hour. But the world just kept turning, regardless of what I was going through. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just a realization for me at that moment. And when I saw this card, that's what came to mind. So seriously, guys, it's really tapping in for me on a lot of things within my life and just how I'm reading this deck. It is just very, very intuitive. This is one that I thought that I would find for you, or was hoping to find for you. This is the Lovers card. And as you can see, you have this right here, which you're seeing the spinal column and the hips and everything. So you have that womb energy, that creative source, and then you have this Kundalini energy that would rise up through the spine. And then right up here, if you look really nice and close, there is that idea of self-care and self-love. So like I said, there are nuggets within this deck, and I don't want to have to go through all of them with you, because if you do decide to get this deck, I'd like you to do your own discovery of it without me, you know, telling you what I encountered within this deck. But it really just has given me the ability to find these clues and deeper readings, and even kind of clue me in more to my standard RWS, because even the standard RWS, I really was not connected ever. I've never been connected to my standard RWS deck. I only have one version of the RWS, like a true RWS, and that's because I didn't like it. I don't like the images. I don't connect. So I learned from it, and I had that deck alone. That tarot deck alone I had for 3 years, and no other tarot decks. And it was just to learn the tarot, but I never really connected enough to want to dig in really deep. And with this card, or with this deck, it really has allowed me to release those obstacles created only by myself, really, and encourages me to trust my ability to connect to source through the tarot. And it's not just through the art that makes it possible, but it's also the absence of the titles and the numbers. After working with this deck, I realized that one of the deep callings that I got from this deck, I love music, guys, so one of the deep callings that I got from working with this deck as I was listening to my music was from some of the album covers from Carlos Santana. He is one of my absolute favorite artists, and he had an album cover, or a couple of album covers in the 70s, where he had all this collage work. And that's like this card, the moon, really reminded me of one of his album covers. It just brought it to life. And then this one right here, although this guy's hold on this dove is much tighter than I would like to see, there is one album cover where a guy is holding a dove. And so it just really tapped in to that idea. You know, what I love about Carlos Santana's work is that his music is filled with creativity, passion, and just soul. It's a mixed blend of elements. From what he has learned, his knowledge of playing the guitar the way that he does, and then also being divinely guided to create the music that he creates. There's no rules, there's no boundaries. There's just this music that for me just pumps into my soul. And this deck feels like his music to me. Seriously, this deck is amazing. So I'm not trying to push you to buy any decks, but I needed to share this deck. And after working with it for a while, I am just so impressed by this deck. I really, really love this deck. So I appreciate you watching and spending time with me and the Ritual Tarot, and I wish you nothing but peace, joy, and happiness.